Hello, YouTube land. This is Brentonsawin coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Today I have a story coming to you that's a Bigfoot story where someone had shot and buried a Bigfoot. It was basically a family, and several other stories that a lot of these people don't want to give their name away, so I just kind of put them all into one show here, and I hope you enjoy. You're going to really find these very interesting for sure. If anyone out there has a story they'd like to share, you can contact me at brentonsawin@gmail.com. If you want to contribute, you can go to a link in the description, PayPal me. You can make a contribution there. Every contribution is very much appreciated. So anyway, let's go check out this family who had a Bigfoot encounter. They ended up shooting and burying this Bigfoot, and then several other stories after that. And listen to it all the way through because there's lots of little tidbits that are very interesting. Enjoy. Okay, this story is from a fellow who wants to remain anonymous, and it is a fantastic story, so I would encourage you to listen to it all the way to the end, please. It says, I am from a real small town in Florida called Weewachaka. Weewachaka. I don't know how to pronounce that really, but he says Weewa for short. The big city is an hour drive away. The area has lots of lakes and rivers. My parents lived on several acres in the middle of nowhere. We had dirt roads my whole childhood. At the time, we had a single wide trailer. Lots of people in our community were complaining about a skunk ape terrorizing them at night and stealing livestock and pets. My parents were city folks that moved into the area before I was born and opened a business. So my parents told me it was just stories to scare us because we were outsiders. At the time this happened, I was 14 years old and I had a younger brother that was 5 years old. Now, late one Friday night, my dad and I were watching TV. My brother was in bed. My mom was in the kitchen. We had one bedroom, and I had to pass the kitchen and my brother's room to get to the bathroom. My brother was sitting up in bed, and he was crying. And I tried to console him because I didn't want to get him in trouble for not sleeping. He whispered to me a man was looking in his window. I looked at the window, and to my horror, I see a pair of yellow, glowing eyes watching us. So I grabbed my brother, but I had to see the face of this pervert so I could make sure he was arrested. Which my brother in my arms, I looked out the window and I knew my dad was in the living room and he kept a gun on the kitchen counter. So I screamed out, "Dad, some sicko's looking in the window at my brother." Inches away, I saw his whole face. It looked like a Neanderthal human, and with long brown hair, and it looked terrified. Or I think he was saying it looks terrifying to him. His face was at the bottom of the window. When my dad would walk by mowing the grass at 6 foot tall, you would see just his head at the same point on the window, and then it stood up. As it did, I saw this massive chest and abdomen. It must have been 9 foot tall. I saw this massive hairy chest and muscular abs. My dad burst on to the front porch with a gun in his hand and he fires several times. It looked at my dad for a moment, then ran for the tree line. My dad then, and my mother and my brother crying because the sound of the 44 Magnum was so loud. My parents told me to go to bed and take my brother with me. I overheard my parents talking. They didn't call the cops because they didn't know what it was. It was not human, but too similar and too big. My mother told my father, tomorrow I want all the trees gone. Not a single one taller than you can stay. He reluctantly agreed. He called in every friend and every favor and had 7 acres removed by sundown Saturday. I had 2 friends close in age. One lived a mile away and the other 2 miles away. The closest came down that Saturday morning, and I asked if he heard the gunshots the night before. I told him it was my dad. My mother came out and told me to stay out of the woods. She was going to town with my brother to buy curtains and blinds, which was something we didn't really need before, but since this happened, we put curtains up. Now, we were some country boys, and we often explored and took our 22s and shotguns with us. I told my parents I was going to a friend's to play video games, and when we got to my buddies, my mother called to make sure we were there. We snuck out and watched my house. After my mother pulled away, we got our friends, and I guess they basically pulled together their friends so they could go looking. So we grabbed our guns and our machete, and we knew the woods real good. We backtracked to my yard and picked up a trail. We spotted blood from the tree line. My father was washing away blood from the side of the mobile home, and so we went back into the woods following the blood. As we walked, we came across a crude shelter with the remains of what looked like trash stolen all over. So this thing was stealing trash and taking it to this little crude shelter. We followed the trails for hours, and we heard a howl and a scream like no other we had heard before. My father must have heard it, and he grabbed his fathers, and raced into the woods with guns in hand. They looked terrified when finally we crossed paths. He said they saw the blood trail and asked us what we had found. We told them we took them to the shelter we found, and we had been so keen on following the trail we never noticed the carcasses of deer and dogs high in the trees. The fathers chopped down the shelter and urinated all over it. One of them said that we had to mark and take back our land. It sounded crazy, but I looked up to this man, and he seemed to know what he was talking about. The 6 of us made a pact that it was a bear and to never talk about it again. Now, as we moved back to our house, we heard the howl again, and it was mad. It sounded closer this time. Our fathers told us to run. The 3 of them stood side by side firing at something. Of course, we didn't go far. Whatever it was, it died that afternoon. My dad told me to get a few shovels and be quick about it. He didn't want anyone to see a thing because of ridicule that would happen if we all talked about it. I was the only child they let approach because I had already seen it through the window. We took turns digging the hole. It was a Bigfoot, 9 feet or taller, and so wide I could not jump over it. It was a male. Its face was all shot up, but its upper lip was 5 inches from the base of its nose to the opening. Its arms were as big as my dad's legs. Its fingers were as wide as a Coke can. The feet were longer than the barrel of my shotgun. We buried it and left for my house. Our 3 mothers were waiting for us and frantically asked what it was. It was a bear, and it was injured, so we had to put it down and bury it. So we would not get in trouble with the game warden. That's what we told them. And I think my mother knew the truth, but it was best not said. So that's my experience. You can never talk about this stuff to people. They seem to look down on you. I appreciate your time, Anonymous. I mean, he gave me his name, but he didn't want to come forward with this because people would say, all kinds of different things. But interesting story. They kill it and dig a hole and they bury it because they don't even want to try to tell anybody what had happened. It never works out anyway. Out of all the people I've heard that shot one, it doesn't work out, even if you shot it and you pass a lie detector test, which I have known people to do, and it still never works out. You end up the crazy guy who shot the Bigfoot. And that's his story. He got a close look at it, and the description is very, very interesting. Having fingers the size of Coke cans, and the mouth being so far from the nose. It's a huge creature, sounds like to me. They kill this thing and they bury it and just shut up about it. That's probably the best thing you could have done, especially if the thing was threatening to your home, looking in the windows, roaring, and you didn't know what to do, and you think you might have a danger to your family. But anyway, thank you for sending this in, and you know who you are. We didn't say anything that would give your name away and who you are, so I appreciate you sending this story to me. A very interesting story for sure. The next fellow here has labeled his message, "We could have shot a Sasquatch." Hi, Brenton. Great YouTube channel you have. Growing up in the interior of British Columbia, Canada, we spent most weekends up in the mountains dirt biking, driving, snowmobiling, hiking, getting firewood, etc. Much of the area has or had been logged a few times before, many years before. So is old logging roads all over the mountains. Seen quite a few moose, deer, caribou, grizzly, black bears into long distance target practice, and my friend, we had he and his friend were into long distance target practicing. Okay. And we had a valley about 3/4 of a mile wide at the highest elevation, tapering down to less. We parked on one side and have targets on the other side from 400 yards to 800 yards away, depending on height. One day we had set up targets on one side, drove to the other side over the river, and had a nice long lunch. We were sighting in, and my friend spotted a bear about 500 yards away. We're not hunters, though, so we both watched it and through our scopes. When it stood up on two legs, walked in swinging arms a few yards, then knelt down to pick up berries, we knew it was nothing we had seen before. We watched it, almost in shock, almost unable to believe our eyes, for 10 minutes in total. The typical Bigfoot report: tall, no neck, down, dark brown hair, and massively built. We never really saw its face, just a couple of brief side glances when it looked to the side for berries. It then stood up and, arms swinging, took off and clearing over downed logs and stumps at a rate no man could ever do. We didn't do any target practice that day. The weekend after, we drove up and hiked to where we had saw it, judging from a leaning tree and a broken branch that it was about 7.5 to 8 foot tall. We could have pumped it full of lead with our semi-automatic magnums, but it didn't seem right. That's my story. Interesting story. He could have shot it, but they didn't. Thank you for your story. You know who you are. Now, this lady sent a kind of a short little piece of information, and I thought it's worth kind of documenting and kind of interesting. She said, my husband and I went to camp out by Cannon Lake, Texas, by the Guadalupe River off of Highway 306. And before the evening got dark, my husband and I decided we would go around a fire and get warm. It was around February or March of the year, and we were just talking, and then all of a sudden, we heard this loud roar. Then again, and again. And it didn't dawn on me that it was a Bigfoot. Around that area, it just didn't seem like there would be Bigfoot to me. Because right away, we saw the park ranger come by real fast around our campsite, and had his big light on and to check all the campers on that cul-de-sac at the campground. And he left real fast, checking all the sites. I tell you what, after hearing your videos of people that have recorded how they sound, I tell my husband it was a Bigfoot in the area. And we live in Austin, Texas. After that roaring sound, we were looking over each other, and we said a prayer, and then we went to bed. And now my husband asked me to go camping over there to Concan, Texas, and I tell him those woods are very unpredictable, so she's not going to go. But interesting that they were hearing these roars and stuff, and then the park ranger comes through all freaking out, shining the light around, and then rushing off and pursuing basically something that was going on in the area. And she thinks that it was a Bigfoot in the area, and the park ranger was trying to deal with it. I thought that was worth sharing. Thank you for sharing this, and you know who you are. Now, this next fellow sent in a couple stories. And this first one is labeled, It Followed Me Home. When I was 14, I trapped after school for coons, fox, beaver, muskrat, etc. I lived in Dutchess County, New York, about 100 miles north of New York City. One day I tried a new bait, i.e. raw bacon, at a setting in a semi-dry stream bed about 100 feet from high tension lines that came down from Canada and went down to New York City. When I checked the trap the next day, I was expecting to find a fox. However, the trap was gone. The chain was broken and the bait was missing. I scanned the area looking for some disturbance in the leaves. The ground was covered in oak leaves. I saw an area where the leaves had been messed up. It was the trap. About 100 feet away, bent and broken. There was no disturbance in the oak leaves leading up to the trap, so the trap must have been torn from the tree and thrown the 100 feet. At first, I thought it had to be someone who didn't like trappers, but I was trapping on our own property. No one was given permission to be on our land. Also, if a person messed with the trap, how would that explain why the raw bacon had been taken? This was my most powerful trap, a double long spring that opened over 6 inches. There was no animal except maybe a bear that could destroy the trap and break the chain. However, there were no bears in Dutchess County. Besides, bears can't throw traps anyway. Later that night, about 9 p.m., I was in my bedroom and I heard screams coming from outside the window. I told my family and we all went out to the front porch to investigate. The screams sounded like a woman about to give birth. The screams had so much anguish and anger, and they were so unbelievably loud that my hair was flapping in the wind. My whole body was vibrating, and the sound was going right through me. It sounded like whatever it was standing 1 foot in front of me, screaming in my face. But there was nothing there in front of me. It felt like my breath was being sucked out of me. My father did not know what to make of it either. We could hear it, but saw nothing. The closest trees were about 50 to 60 yards away, but the sound was coming from right in front of us, not far away from us at all. I was 14 and I didn't have a gun of my own, so I thought about asking my father if he would trust me to use a shotgun. Every time I tried to get my nerve up to ask my father if I could take the shotgun out there and see what it was, the screams would become 5 times louder. I remember thinking, whatever this is, it is reading my mind. My family got scared and all went into the house. I stayed there longer to prove to it I was not intimidated by it, but my family and I too, went in the house. The next day, my family did not want to talk about what happened. It was like it didn't happen. That next day, I picked up all my traps and I just said to myself in a private prayer, Lord, I don't know what I caught, but why it followed me home. But perhaps one day you'll explain to me what happened here. And his next story is called I Had Lunch with a Sasquatch. When I was 32, I was a door-to-door insurance salesman in the backwoods of Corinth, Vermont. I stopped on a back road to eat lunch one day in the fall. I remember the name of the road was Dump Road. It led to the town dump. Every town in Vermont had a dump road. After eating my lunch about 10 minutes, I had to take a pee. I went into the woods about 15 feet. As I looked around, I saw something else steaming. Guess because his pee was steaming because it was a fall day and what have you. But he saw something else steaming about 10 feet from me. I went over to it, looked at it more closely. I could not believe my eyes. It was an animal skin, still warm, steaming in the cold Vermont air. It was still hot. It was about 2 feet long. It was turned upside or inside out like a sock. This was pulled off of one's, like it was pulled off of one's foot inside out. I pulled the right side out to see what it was. It was a large black, brown, and white domestic rabbit. Something had taken someone's pet rabbit and had it for lunch, raw, out in the middle of nowhere. There was no one around. It was miles to the nearest house. The woods seemed dead still. I never heard a thing the whole time I was there. Once again, I said a prayer asking the Lord to someday explain to me what had happened there in the woods that day. And, all right, from here he goes on. Say he's 71 years old now, and I believe that I must have caught a baby Sasquatch in the trap that day 57 years ago. That would explain what the adult was so angry about and followed me home screaming by breaking its silence. It was probably a complete break of protocol for the Sasquatch to do that to someone. And then he gives his personal opinion about biblical Genesis 6 and stuff like that. And Nephilim, which we've talked about that many times on the show. Very interesting. And it sounds like, too, you know, these Sasquatch sometimes will go and they'll steal people's pets and they will, you know, and they'll eat them. Sometimes you'll find carcasses that'll be gutted because certain time of the year they want the type of vitamins you get from the liver and the heart and all that kind of stuff, and they'll leave the rest of the carcass. But it sounds like this, whatever it was, it just ripped the skin off the rabbit and somehow ate it, and who knows what, you know, where the rest of the carcass was. But very interesting that it was a pet rabbit, the kind of rabbit that would have the pelt that you know is not just a wild rabbit, but is a domestic rabbit. But anyway, Peter, I'll just use your first name there. Thank you for sharing, and if you want to comment on your own story there and tell who you are, you're welcome to do that. Now, this story comes from John. I live in Middle Tennessee, and I have a family in East Tennessee. So on a visit to that area in March of 2011, they took me to the Cumberland Gap area. We were on the Middleborough side of the park, not far from the overlook. I had a camera with me and was making pictures along the way. At time, I would move ahead of the others so I could make pictures as they walked in my direction. I had moved maybe about 150 feet ahead of my group and stopped to look around. That was when I noticed a something strange down below where I was standing. At first, it looked like it was other people on a trail. Later, I would learn that there is no trail on that side of the area. Anyway, I saw what looked like people moving across the gorge below me. Then I saw that they were all black from head to foot. They remained black even in the sunlight. The last figure seemed very large for a man. They walked quietly across my field of view between a large outcropping of rock. By the time it hit me that this might not be people, the last figure had gone beyond my view. I frantically tried to turn on my camera to make a photo, but the camera was too slow in coming on, and I had missed my chance to zoom in on the big black figures below me. Later, I told the others what I had saw, and they said there is no trail in that area. It was a very dangerous terrain. It seems that I may have seen a family of 3 Sasquatch walking below me. It was early in the morning when this happened, as I recall, about 10 a.m. Eastern Time. There were only a few people on the mountain top at this time of day, and it was very quiet at the top. I never told anyone at the visitor center. I was afraid they would only laugh at me. Anyway, this is a true story, and it all happened just as I have said. Well, thank you very much, John, for your story.